Hey, what a week. And here we are, October 27th. Can't believe it. Just days before the nice holiday of Halloween. So, Johnny Gunn's investigation coming to you tonight at 8 o'clock. Bringing you guys a story come on. Best story to have just before Halloween with the zombie killer, the zombie hunter. And it's just like this says, the zombie hunter. We're going to talk about three people tonight. And over in Phoenix, Arizona, we have the zombie hunter, Brian Miller. And then we have Angela Brosm and Melanie Burns. So we have this guy, Brian Miller, who likes to dress up as a zombie hunter. I mean, to the T. He wears this mask. He has the whole getup on. He bought a police car, reconverted it over to like a zombie mobile, like the Ghostbusters, but this is all zombied out. And then he has fake blood painted all over this thing. He has a life-size creatured up zombie in the back seat of the police car and big amplifier so he can talk on his mic as he drives through the town. And this Brian Miller would go around the town into the parades, into the local shops and businesses and be this zombie hunter. And, and they actually called him a local celebrity. This guy's taking pictures with everybody in town. A number of pictures with him with the local cops with their arms around him. They thought this guy was great. And so this is back in 1990s, okay, 1992. In the 90s this was. So this is when he was into this zombie hunter deal. And this is this Brian Miller. And again, he would go into the parades and do some local shows and things like that. And then what happens, we have a young lady, Angela Brosman, a 21-year-old, on November 1992 in Phoenix, Arizona, living in an apartment complex right there in a nice community. It's the evening time, 6:30 going on 7. Her and her boyfriend are there at the apartment, just got done eating a nice dinner. And she decides that she wants to go on a bike ride, and she's going to go by herself. And they go to the Canal Trail. It's a beautiful trail. And a lot of people walk, bike ride, and just enjoy this canal and the beautiful outdoors of Arizona. So she leaves about 7 o'clock on a bike ride and goes up to the trail and never made it home to meet her boyfriend, who was there waiting, nervously waiting, wondering where she can be. So time goes by. He goes and takes a ride out to where the route that she would actually be on the bike trail to the canal. And unfortunately, there was no sign of her. So he calls the police and they start looking all over for her. Okay. And eventually they find a torso of a body. And then later on, a local fisherman fishing in the canal there, finds a human's head. And it was stuck in the grid right there in this big canal. And they found a torso of a woman and a human head. And the human head was, now the body's been missing for 10 days. So now the human head looks like it's just been dismembered from the body. So they don't know if he preserved it and then brought it back. It's just very strange. This is a strange character. This is the Brian Miller, the zombie hunter, who they're thinking who's done this crime. So they find the head inside the canal, and they find the torso. So, but nothing ever comes up. It just sits and sits. They're looking all over for whoever could have done this. Nothing comes up. It's just an open case. And then in September, which is 10 months ahead of November 1992, is when Angela went missing. And then 10 months later in September, another young girl, a 17-year-old though this time, Melanie Burns, mom's at work, she's at home alone, and the kid decides to just go on a bike ride. She's bored. She goes on a bike ride by herself. Where else? To the canal trail where everybody goes, okay? Seriously, all the kids, adults, everybody's walking and riding their bikes on this trail, walking their dogs. and she is brutally stabbed to death on the trail. So a local woman, Charlotte, who goes on a bike ride with her little baby on the back seat. You know, she has a little baby seat on her bike and heads out on the bike trail to the canal on that bike trail again. And she's riding her bike with the baby, enjoying a beautiful day. And she rides her bike over a puddle, and it splashes on her. And then she's wondering, God, that didn't look right. Something looked a little fishy about that puddle. She turns back around, goes back to where she sees this puddle of blood. And now you got to remember, now the night before, just not long ago, just that night, we had the little girl, 7-year-old Melanie, took off on her bike ride, never made it home. Never made it home. So the mom gets all nervous and again calls the cops, missing person. So that next day, as this Charlotte's riding her bike on the trail, she crosses over a puddle of blood like you wouldn't believe. She stops, gets off her bike, and she can see that the puddle of blood also has a trail, a drag mark of blood going all the way up to where these trees are on this canal, and then loops around and looks like it was drugged back into the canal. So somebody brutally attacked Melanie right there on the trail, drug her body to the bushy area and to where the trees are to sexually assault this little girl, 17-year-old, who went on a bike ride while her mom was at work in Phoenix, Arizona, just to get out and have some fun before she goes to bed. Never made it home. Okay. So, like I said, Charlotte's riding her bike with a little baby, finds this puddle of blood and sees this trail, calls the police, please come out. And you have an all-out search. And of course, they find the body and brings up this case that happened a decade ago. So now it's 2014, okay? And this case is still going on. It's never been solved. Nobody never knew what was going on. Brian Miller's still going out. You got the zombie hunter driving around like he's zombie man. And this case is just as cold as can be. 21-year-old girl murdered, heads cut off, torso found. When we have Melanie Burns, 17 years old, brutally stabbed to death, sexually assaulted, and no murder suspect, nothing. So in 2014, there is a convention, a DNA convention, where all the local enforcements everybody's just getting together throughout the whole country, and they go to this convention. It's in a DNA convention. And the cops run across a woman who goes up to them and says, you know, I have a program and a software that I think is going to help you guys solve a lot of these cases, and especially the one that we hear a lot about on the 2 girls that were murdered at the canal in Phoenix, Arizona. And she tells them that she has a new DNA that it's called genetic genealogy DNA. So it's a genetic DNA that they do to find genealogical traces in your body to go to you, other people, family members, and things like that. Now, this isn't now because we know we have it. This is in 2014. So these detectives come back and they do this. They run these tests, okay? And it comes back with 6 people, a hit with this generical DNA. And the one hit that hits them hard, the one closest to the crime, is Brian Miller, the zombie hunter. Can you believe this? A decade later, we have the zombie hunter, Brian Miller, the killer. Nobody can believe this now. He's a divorced father. He's 42 years old. He raises his daughter himself. He's 42 years old now. So the detectives know they have a hit with his generical DNA. So they start following him. And this guy, he worked at Amazon, normal life. He worked at the Amazon warehouse, and he was so into this zombie ordeal. He'd drive that zombie vehicle to the Amazon work every day. It's sitting in the parking lot. Just a local celebrity, this guy was. So the detectives start following him around, okay? So they want to talk to him, so they invite him to go to the Chili's because they have to somehow get his DNA just to make sure it's a 100% hit on this testing that they have done. So they get him to the Chili's, they order him a burger, water, and everything. And he's eating everything. He's talking to these detectives, but he's not drinking anything. So they finally get him, and he does drink, and they take that cup to the testing on the DNA, and it does come back to 100% hit on Brian Miller, who's the zombie hunter of this community in Phoenix, Arizona. And now he's the murderer who is raising his daughter, who's a teenager, by himself. He's living a life, and him knowing that he's taken the two lives of these girls, and he's still going a decade later. But now he knows something's coming down. And we'll talk a little bit more about this Brian Miller here in a little bit, but I have a video I want to show you from 48 Hours that'll talk a little bit about this case and what's going on, because cold cases are the best. I mean, I tell you guys, I love to do a cold case because it brings the closure to the families and lets them have peace, you know. I mean, never 100% peace, but at least they know a decade later who and what happened to their kids. So we're going to go ahead and play this video, and then we'll talk about it and see what you guys think.
This week's 48 Hours reports on a decades-old murder case that eventually led investigators to a man known as the zombie hunter. In the 1990s, two young women were murdered while riding their bikes in Phoenix, Arizona. Their cases remain unsolved for decades. Then, using genetic genealogy, investigators narrowed it to a suspect, a local celebrity who was known for dressing like a zombie hunter. Here's a look at Peter Van Zant's report.
There are not many crimes that are like this one. You had women riding bicycles along the canal on a typical Phoenix evening, ambushed, stabbed multiple times.
Brianna Whitney, the true crime reporter for the CBS affiliate KPHO in Phoenix, says the first victim was 21-year-old Angela Brasso, whose body was found in November 1992.
Police are looking at this scene and thinking, what on earth happened and who did this?
10 months later, the body of 17-year-old high school student Melanie Burness was found in one of the city's canals. Investigators found the same DNA at both scenes, but had no match, says Detective Clark Schwarzkopf.
I think there was over 600 persons of interest.
After some 20 years, investigators zeroed in on 42-year-old Brian Patrick Miller, a divorced father raising his teenage daughter.
Seeing him with his daughter, I just don't see this guy as being the monster in 1992 and 93 that would do this to these women.
But as Schwarzkopf soon learned, Miller had a unique alter ego.
Everybody in the Phoenix area knew Brian Patrick Miller as this character called the Zombie Hunter.
The Zombie Hunter.
The Zombie Hunter.
Like a comic book character?
Yeah, like a comic book character.
Miller dressed in a homemade costume and drove a tricked-out former police car.
People wanted to take pictures with him, including law enforcement officers.
Schwarzkopf was skeptical, but the detective secured Miller's DNA. Days later, the head of the forensic lab had some news.
She leans down to me, she goes, "It's him." I go, "What?" She goes, "Brian Miller, it's him."
It was like he was hiding in plain sight.
Look at that.
Yeah. Wow. Peter Van Zant joins us right now. So how did they zero in on him as the suspect, the main suspect?
So the cold case unit came up with the name Miller when they looked through all of these files, and they brought in a genetic genealogist, and they had the DNA of the murderer. That genealogist took this DNA and did the magic that they do these days and ended up coming up with 6 names of people who lived in the southwest of the United States who had the last name Miller. One of them was Brian Miller, who lived in Phoenix. And so they do an undercover operation. They lure him to a Chili's restaurant, offer him a burger and something to drink, takes a sip from the glass. They have the DNA from that. It goes off to the lab. Some days later, it comes back, and it's the man who is the zombie hunter known all throughout Phoenix, living out in the
In
open.
plain sight. And even the
he's
cops
killer.
liked him.
There's pictures. We have all these pictures of cops with him. They had no idea who they were standing next to.
I'm always blown away, Peter, when you see people who do this who have daughters of their own. There's a part of me that just thinks you have a little girl. You just couldn't possibly do that to another woman. That always surprises me. But why did he dress up as that zombie hunter dude in the first place? What was he doing?
He was a horror film fanatic. All his friends, that's what they did, is they watched these kinds of films.
Nut job.
And he became a zombie. This was 21 years after the murders. What do zombies do? They're the undead.
know.
They are relentlessly violent.
I don't know. What
They are
do they do?
they're relentlessly violent, and
Right.
I think there was something about
It's a
that
big thing.
That
made him
created
become
this character.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
man.
I mean, people who had seen this car driving all over town, not realizing it
Is
was
the
a killer.
killer.
Curious to hear what he has to say now, Brian.
Yeah, and that's
Oh, he claims he has no memory of any of these
of course.
murders.
That's why we should tune in. You can
Yes.
see Peter, this full report, Unmasking the Zombie Hunter, on 48 Hours tomorrow night at 10, 9 Central here on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Everyone deserves a
That was
healthcare
awesome.
partner.
But anyway, I just can't get over that. We have the zombie hunter. And a little bit more about this guy, okay, the zombie hunter. His career of being a nut job didn't start when he was an adult. It goes way back to when he's 16 years old, okay? So when he was 16 years old, he's riding a public bus. I guess he's going home, who knows? And there's a woman on the bus that he's kind of messing with. You know, she's an older woman, not old, but older than him. He's 16. So she gets off the bus, her not realizing he gets off the bus and he's following her. Now, this is when he's 16 years old. He's 42 years old now. And then it was 1992 when he committed the murders with the two girls. So he's following this lady he met on the bus, goes behind her, comes up. And this woman that's in front of him feels something on her back, doesn't know what it is. It's Brian Miller behind her, and he stabbed her. She puts her hand behind her and sees she has a handful of blood. So he gets arrested at a young age, and he gets charged and gets put in a juvenile detention center. And as he's in a juvenile detention center, his mom at home goes through all of his stuff in his room, as she's told by these psychiatrists and stuff to go through everything. And I'm sure the cops did too. And they found a little notepad and everything in it on everything he's wanted to do. I mean, a little note on he wanted to kill somebody. He wanted to stab. He wanted to behead somebody, sexually assault a girl. And these are the things he had listed down at 16 years old of things that he wanted to do, of his accomplishments of this world today. This is the kind of guy, the zombie hunter, the local Phoenix celebrity was in his mind. He wasn't planning on going to school to be a doctor, a dentist, to say whatever. He's planning his life and noting down what he wants to do to innocent little and young women. So this is a total freak out of a cold case, which is great because he is charged with 2 counts of kidnapping. Now, this is now, not from when he was 16. He's already paid his dues for that, and unfortunately, it never helped him. So as the 2 girls that were murdered here in Phoenix in 1992, he is finally charged a decade later with 2 counts of kidnapping, sexual assault, and 2 counts of murder. And we will have the audio and video and stuff up tomorrow on this maniac killer who brutally killed these girls, sexually molested these girls, decapitated the one girl and cut her body up where they just found her torso. He's just a nut job. And he was developing that way as a young child. And his mom knew about it. She saw all these weird little messages and drawings and all these little layouts of diagrams of what he wanted to do as he grew up and the things that he wanted to do to people. And he fulfilled them. And then he dressed around looking like this freak zombie character. But you got to realize, guys, those zombie movies characters they're still big. They were definitely big back then. So he had a gig going, and that was his little way of hiding out, I guess. But There we have another cold case from a decade later, solved. And we have the killer off the streets, because who knows when they snap again. They always go back to the same thing. They may be out 10, 15 years, 8 years, but they'll always do it again. It's always there. And the sad thing is he's raising a 16-year-old daughter. Now, this daughter has to now develop the rest of her life knowing her dad is a nut job. He's a murderer. He's a sexual predator, a maniac that can just cut up bodies. So here we go with the zombie hunter. Just before Halloween, guys. It's October 27th, Friday night. Johnny Gunn's Investigation, trying to bring as much coverage as we can. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe. You guys want a message, go ahead and put some comments in there. Also, too, today was the Kohlberger trial, so we're gonna go over that again tomorrow, kind of follow into that. We have a lot going on, a lot. And then on Halloween, we have the Delphi, Idaho murder case going, to where the hearing's coming up, to where he wants to get himself out of that prison where he's getting abused by the guards and put in a jail. And we'll go over that as well. So, guys, thank you for tonight listening. Johnny Gunn's Investigation. You guys enjoy your Friday night, and I will see you tomorrow. And you guys remember, be safe out there. Have a good night, guys.